Imagine it's 1989. You're standing in the Ginza district of Tokyo. The neon lights are blinding. The champagne is flowing. And the economy is absolutely unstoppable. Japan is officially the second largest economy in the world, and everyone believes it's about to overtake the United States. They call it the Japanese miracle. The vibe is invincible. You watch a businessman pay $500,000 for a bottle of wine at auction, using money from his company's real estate portfolio that has tripled in value in 3 years, and think to yourself, this party is never going to end. Now, snap back to reality. It's 2025. That party didn't just end. Someone spiked the punch with cyanide, and everyone's been in a coma for 35 years. Japan hasn't just slowed down. It has entered a state that economists call secular stagnation, a fancy term for economic death while still technically alive. It is the only developed economy that has been in crisis for longer than most of its workers have been alive. While the U.S. economy has tripled since 1990, Japan's GDP is roughly the same size it was when The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air premiered. We're talking about 3.5 decades of going absolutely nowhere. But here's the twisted part. The seeds of this disaster weren't planted by bad luck or natural disaster. They were planted during those golden years when everyone thought Japan was invincible. Japan is suffering from a very specific, very fatal condition: the yen trap. Today, we're doing an autopsy on the world's most sophisticated zombie economy. We're going to look at the 7 specific reasons why this technological superpower is economically trapped in 1991. Welcome to the lost decades. Population: 123 million souls who can't escape. Let's start with the ghost in the room. You can't understand why Japan is failing today without understanding the catastrophic explosion that happened in 1991. And I use the word explosion literally. This was a financial nuclear bomb. You see, back in the 1980s, Japan had developed a superpower. It wasn't just making better cars than Detroit. It wasn't just dominating electronics. It was creating the largest asset bubble in human history. Here's how the Japanese economic miracle actually worked in the late 80s. Let's say you owned an apartment building in Tokyo. You bought it in 1985 for 100 million yen. By 1989, it was worth 400 million yen. You didn't improve the building. You didn't add floors. The land it sat on, literally the dirt, quadrupled in value. So you went to the bank. The bank looked at your 400 million yen property and said, "Don't worry, Tanaka-san. We'll lend you 300 million yen against that." What did you do with that 300 million yen? You bought more property, which also quadrupled in value. Then you borrowed against that, and bought more, and more. This was the asset inflation strategy. It was Japan's favorite economic drug. And the entire country, individuals, corporations, banks, the government, was completely addicted. At the peak in 1989, the land under the Imperial Palace in Tokyo was theoretically worth more than all the real estate in California combined. Japan, a country the size of Montana, had a total real estate valuation higher than the entire United States. The Nikkei stock index hit 38,916 on December 29, 1989. Japanese companies were buying Rockefeller Center, Columbia Pictures, Pebble Beach Golf Course. The world looked at Japan and thought, they've won capitalism. But here's the dark side of that drug. Asset bubbles always pop. Always. No exceptions in human history. In 1989, the Bank of Japan looked at inflation hitting 3% and panicked. They raised interest rates from 2.5% to 6% in barely a year. This was supposed to cool down the economy. It didn't cool it down. It detonated it. What happened next was the fastest destruction of wealth in peacetime history. The Nikkei crashed from 38,916 to 14,000 in 2 years, a 65% collapse. Tokyo real estate fell 70% by 1995 and would eventually fall 87% from peak. 1,500 trillion yen in paper wealth, $10 trillion at the time, simply evaporated. Imagine you're that guy who bought the apartment building. In 1989, you owned 400 million yen in property. You borrowed 300 million yen against it. By 1995, the property is worth 120 million yen. But you still owe 300 million yen. You are underwater by 180 million yen. You're bankrupt. But you can't just walk away because Japanese mortgages are recourse loans. You owe the full amount even if the collateral is worthless. An entire generation, everyone who bought property or stocks between 1985 to 1990, was financially destroyed. These people are still alive today. They're in their 60s and 70s. And they remember. This is the yen trap, stage 1. When an entire society learns that growth equals disaster, they stop taking risks forever. Japanese citizens who lived through the bubble pop became pathologically risk-averse. They stopped investing. They stopped borrowing. They stopped spending. They started hoarding cash. Even today, 35 years later, Japanese households hold 1,100 trillion yen, $7.3 trillion, in cash and bank deposits. Not stocks. Not real estate. Cash. Earning 0% interest. Why? Because the last time they believed in growth, they lost everything. Why does this matter today? Because you can't have economic growth without risk-taking. You need entrepreneurs starting businesses. You need consumers buying houses and cars. You need investors funding innovation. Japan lost the risk-taking gene in 1991. And they never got it back. The Bank of Japan has tried everything to restart growth. Zero interest rates since 1999, negative interest rates since 2016, quantitative easing worth 500 trillion yen, buying stocks directly. Nothing works. Because you can't force people to take risks when their entire life experience tells them that risk equals ruin. This is the curse of the yen trap. It's the psychological scar tissue of an entire civilization that experienced financial Hiroshima and decided, never again. If the bubble pop was a nuclear bomb, this next point is a slow-motion asteroid impact that takes 50 years but is equally fatal. You cannot have economic growth without people. It's basic math. You need workers to make things. You need consumers to buy things. Japan is running out of both. Fast. Let's take a trip to a typical Japanese rural town. You've probably seen those viral articles. Japanese villages paying people 1 million yen to move here. Sounds amazing, right? You imagine yourself in a peaceful countryside, growing vegetables, living the simple life. But ask yourself, why are they paying you 1 million yen? It's not generosity. It's because the town is dying. The school closed 10 years ago because there are no children. The hospital closed because there's no staff. The last person under 40 moved to Tokyo in 2008. These aren't real estate incentives. They are hospice care for civilizations. Japan has one of the lowest birth rates in the known universe. To keep a population stable, you need a fertility rate of 2.1 children per woman. That's replacement rate. Japan is currently at 1.26. They're not just shrinking, they're imploding. Last year, Japan recorded 727,277 births. That's the lowest since records began in 1899. Fewer babies were born in modern, wealthy, peaceful Japan than during World War II when half the men were dead and the cities were firebombed to rubble. But it gets worse. Japan also has the oldest population on Earth. 29% of Japanese citizens are over 65. By 2040, that will be 35%. By 2060, 40%. This creates a terrifying economic shape called the inverted pyramid. In a healthy economy, you have a huge base of young workers, 20 to 40 years old, supporting a small tip of retirees, 65 plus. Picture Egypt's pyramids. Solid base, small top. In Japan, the pyramid is upside down. You have a massive, swelling, top-heavy generation of retirees pressing down on a shrinking, crumbling base of young workers. Picture an inverted pyramid balanced on its point. It's going to topple. It's physics. This leads to the fiscal bomb. Japan spends 60 trillion yen per year on Social Security. Most of it pensions and elderly health care. That's 34% of the entire government budget. Every year, the government has to take a massive slice of money. Money that could be used for AI research, green energy, infrastructure, or tax cuts, and funnel it directly into keeping 90-year-olds alive for one more year. I'm not being cruel. I'm being mathematical. Japan spends more on adult diapers than on children's diapers. That tells you everything. And the politics are toxic. The elderly are the largest voting bloc. Politicians who suggest cutting pensions or raising the retirement age get destroyed in elections. So instead, you get policies that make the problem worse. Japan's retirement age was 60 until recently. They raised it to 65. In a country where people live to 85, that means 20 years of pension payments. Meanwhile, young Japanese workers are being taxed into oblivion to pay for this. Income taxes, consumption taxes, social security contributions. A young worker in Tokyo can lose 40 to 50% of their salary to taxes and mandatory insurance. This creates a death spiral. Because taxes are so high and salaries are stagnant, we'll get to that. Young couples can't afford to buy a house or have kids. So they don't have kids. Which makes the demographic crisis worse. Which requires higher taxes. Which makes it even harder to afford kids. It's a snake eating its own tail. And the snake is 129 million people. When you walk through Tokyo, you see the future. Every third person on the train is elderly. Maternity wards are being converted into elderly care facilities. Elementary schools are closing while silver towns, retirement communities, are booming. Japan isn't a country preparing for the future. It's a country managing its own decline as comfortably as possible. The most dystopian stat. Japan now has more pets than children under 15. There are more dogs in Japan than humans under the age of 15. You can't run an economy on Shiba Inus. Now let's say you're brave. You ignore the demographics. You ignore the psychological trauma. And you think, I'll just invest in Japanese companies. They make great cars and electronics, right? Welcome to the graveyard. Because Japanese companies aren't companies anymore. They're zombies. A zombie company is a business that earns just enough revenue to pay the interest on its debts, but not enough to ever pay down the principal or invest in growth. It's the corporate equivalent of a coma patient on life support. Technically alive, functionally dead. Japan has more zombie companies than any developed nation on Earth. Estimates suggest 20 to 30% of all listed Japanese companies are zombies. We're talking about thousands of firms that should have gone bankrupt in 1995, but are still shambling around in 2025. Why do they exist? Because Japanese banks refuse to let them die. Here's how it works. Let's say you're a bank in 1992. You lent 10 billion yen to a real estate company. The real estate crashed. The company is now worth 2 billion yen, but still owes you 10 billion yen. If you call the loan and force bankruptcy, you have to write off 8 billion yen as a loss. That loss shows up on your balance sheet. Your bank looks weak. Regulators investigate. Your CEO gets fired. You might go bankrupt yourself. So instead, you do something called evergreening. You lend the company more money to pay the interest on the original loan. The company stays current on payments. Your books look fine. Everyone pretends everything is okay. This has been happening for 35 years. Japanese banks are sitting on an estimated 50 to 100 trillion yen in bad loans that are disguised as performing loans because of evergreening. It's accounting fraud at a national scale. Why does this matter for the economy? Because zombie companies are parasites. They consume resources, bank credit, skilled workers, office space, but produce almost nothing of value. Healthy companies that want to grow can't get loans because the banks are too busy keeping zombies alive. Young entrepreneurs can't get funding. Innovation is starved. Worse, zombie companies keep prices low. If you're a healthy bakery charging 300 yen for bread and making a profit, but your competitor is a zombie bakery charging 200 yen, because they don't care about profit, they just need revenue to pay interest, you can't compete. You either drop prices and stop being profitable yourself, or you go out of business. This is called zombie congestion. Zombies clog up the market and prevent healthy competition. Case study: Sharp Corporation. Sharp used to be a global electronics giant. They invented the LCD screen. In the 2000s, they were a symbol of Japanese innovation. Then they made bad bets on LCD factories right as the market shifted. By 2012, they were insolvent. They should have been restructured or shut down. Instead, Japanese banks kept lending the money. The government pressured banks to support Sharp. 4 years, Sharp limped along, burning cash, laying off workers, selling assets. Finally, in 2016, they were bought by Foxconn Taiwan in a humiliating fire sale. A Japanese technology icon, gutted and sold to a foreign company because Japanese banks refused to let it die with dignity in 2012. The result of zombie tolerance. Capital allocation is broken. Money goes to dying firms, not growing ones. Productivity growth is zero. Zombies don't innovate. Young companies can't compete. Zombies undercut prices. Worker mobility is frozen. Workers stay at zombies out of loyalty or fear. Japan's corporate sector is a graveyard where the dead walk among the living, and no one has the courage to start digging graves. Speaking of things that refuse to die, this channel, we're exposing the economic zombies shambling through the global economy every week. If you want to know which country is next, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and unlike the Bank of Japan, I promise we're not here to prop up failed institutions. Also, drop a comment below. Have you ever worked for a company that was clearly dying but management pretended everything was fine? Let me know your horror stories. I read them all. Now, back to Japan's slow-motion collapse. Pop quiz. Would you rather live in a country where prices go up 2% per year, inflation, or a country where prices go down 1% per year, deflation? If you said deflation, congratulations, you just chose economic suicide. Japan has been fighting deflation on and off since 1995. For 30 years, prices in Japan have barely moved. In some years, they actually fell. On the surface, this sounds great. My iPhone costs less this year than last year. Awesome. But here's what actually happens in a deflationary economy. The deflationary death spiral. Prices fall 1% this year. You think, if I wait, things will be cheaper next year. You delay buying a car, a house, new clothes. Because you and everyone else delays, businesses sell less. Businesses cut prices further to attract buyers. Prices fall 2% next year. You think, see? I was right to wait. I'll wait longer. Businesses earn less revenue, so they cut wages or lay off workers. Workers have less money, so they spend even less. Prices fall 3%. This is the deflationary spiral. Once it starts, it's almost impossible to stop because it's driven by rational individual behavior that creates collective disaster. Why is deflation so deadly? Because of debt. Let's say you borrow 30 million yen in 1995 to buy a house. Your salary is 5 million yen per year. The house is worth 35 million yen. Everything seems fine. Now it's 2025. Because of deflation. Your salary is still 5 million yen, wages didn't grow. But the house is now worth 20 million yen, prices fell. You still owe 20 million yen on the mortgage. You're underwater. And because your salary didn't grow, that 20 million yen debt feels bigger every year. It's taking a larger share of your stagnant income. This is called debt deflation. When prices fall, the real value of debt increases. You owe the same number of yen, but those yen are worth more. For the entire economy, this is catastrophic. Consumers crushed by debt can't spend. Businesses crushed by debt can't invest. Both cut back, causing more deflation, which makes the debt worse, which causes more cutting. Japan has been stuck in this trap for 35 years. The Bank of Japan's desperate measures. The Bank of Japan has tried everything to create inflation. Yes, create inflation, the thing every other country tries to prevent. 1999. Cut interest rates to zero. Nothing happened. 2001. Started quantitative easing. Printing money to buy government bonds. First central bank ever to try this. Inflation. Still zero. 2013. Abenomics. Massive QE program, 80 trillion yen per year. Target. 2% inflation. Result: 0.5% inflation. 2016. Negative interest rates. The BOJ started charging banks to hold reserves, trying to force them to lend. This had never been tried in human history. Result: banks didn't lend more. They just passed the cost to consumers. 2024. The BOJ balance sheet is 750 trillion yen, bigger than Japan's entire economy. They own 50% of all Japanese government bonds and 7% of the stock market. The central bank is the market. And inflation, 2 to 3% in 2024, mostly because of imported energy costs, not domestic demand. The horror of deflation is psychological. Once people expect prices to fall, they act like prices will fall forever. And their actions make it true. Deflation trains an entire society to be pessimistic, to hoard cash, to delay everything. It's economic depression made permanent. Japan has lived in this twilight zone for longer than most of its workforce has been alive. An entire generation has never experienced normal economic growth. They don't even know what it looks like. You can't escape the yen trap when the trap is inside your head. Let's talk about the Japanese salaryman. You've seen him: dark suit, white shirt, exhausted face, sleeping on the train after another 14-hour day at the office. He is the backbone of Japan's economy. He is also the reason Japan can't escape the lost decades. Japanese corporate culture was forged in the 1960s, 70s during the high-growth era. It was built on 3 pillars. Lifetime employment. You join a company at 22, stay until 65. Seniority-based pay. You get raises based on age, not performance. Company loyalty above all. The company is your family. During high growth, this worked beautifully. Companies invested in training because workers stayed forever. Workers worked insane hours because they'd be rewarded with promotions eventually. Everyone won. But when growth stopped in 1991, this system became a prison. Here's the problem. In the West, if your company is struggling, you get laid off. It's brutal, but it's efficient. You find a new job at a growing company. Your skills are reallocated to productive uses. The economy adapts. In Japan, you can't fire anyone. Legally, you can, but culturally and practically, it's nearly impossible. Firing someone is seen as a profound moral failure. Companies will do anything to avoid layoffs. So what happens when growth stops? Companies can't fire the expensive 55-year-old managers who aren't productive. They're stuck paying them 10 million yen per year because of seniority. To afford this, they stop hiring young people. Or they hire young people on temporary contracts with no benefits, no job security, and low pay. This created a 2-tier economy. Tier 1, regular employees, saishain. Mostly older men. Unfireable. High salaries. Full benefits. Tier 2, non-regular employees, hisaiki. Mostly young people and women. Temporary contracts. Low wages. No security. By 2024, 38% of Japanese workers are non-regular. That's 21 million people in the gig economy before gig economy was a thing. What does this do to young people? Imagine you're 25 years old in Tokyo. You graduated from a good university. You got a job at a company as a contract worker. You make 2.5 million yen per year, $18,000. Your boss, who is 58 and does nothing all day, makes 12 million yen. You can't get a mortgage because you're not a regular employee. You can't afford to get married or have kids. You will never become a regular employee because the company isn't hiring for those positions. Those positions are held by the 58-year-old who can't be fired. You're economically trapped. Your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. Spent as a permanent temp. This creates the parasite single phenomenon. Adults in their 30s and 40s still living with their parents because they can't afford independence. The productivity nightmare. Because you can't fire anyone, Japanese companies are filled with dead weight. Entire departments exist just to give older employees something to do. There's a Japanese term, Madajawazoku, the window seat tribe. These are older employees who have been moved to desks by the window, away from important work, where they sit for 8 hours a day doing nothing, waiting for retirement. They're not working, but they're being paid. Because you can't fire them. Meanwhile, the talented 28-year-old with ideas is stuck making photocopies because seniority means the 55-year-old gets the good projects. The overwork death cult. To compensate for low productivity, Japanese companies demand insane hours. The average Japanese worker puts in 1,598 hours per year officially. But service overtime, unpaid overtime, is expected. There's a word in Japanese, karoshi, death from overwork. It's an official cause of death. The government recognizes it. Families can sue for compensation. Every year, hundreds of Japanese workers literally die at their desks from exhaustion, heart attacks, or suicide from work stress. There are companies where it's normal to work until 10 p.m., sleep in a capsule hotel, and return to the office at 7 a.m. 4 years. Until your body gives out. Why don't people quit? Because job mobility is near zero. If you quit a company in Japan, you're seen as disloyal. Other companies don't want to hire you. You're tainted. So you stay. You suffer. You die inside. Or literally die at your desk. This is the corporate loyalty death cult. And it's strangling Japan's economy because you can't innovate, you can't adapt, you can't compete globally when your workforce is trapped in a 1970s system run by 60-year-olds who peaked when fax machines were cutting-edge technology. Quick quiz. Name a Japanese tech company founded after 2000 that's globally dominant. Can't think of one? That's because there isn't one. In 1989, of the world's top 20 companies by market cap, 14 were Japanese. Banks, electronics, manufacturers. Japan dominated the global economy. In 2025, of the world's top 20, 0 are Japanese. What happened? Japan missed the internet revolution. Completely. While America built Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, while China built Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance, Japan built nothing. Why? Because Japan's entire innovation system is broken. It's built for incremental improvement of physical products, cars, cameras, appliances, not for disruptive digital platforms. Problem 1. No venture capital culture. Silicon Valley runs on VC funding. Young founders with an idea pitched to investors get $5 million, burn through it building a product, and either succeed or fail spectacularly. Japan doesn't have that. Japanese banks don't lend to startups. Japanese culture hates failure. If your startup fails, you're marked for life. So Japanese entrepreneurs don't take risks. The few who do have to move to Silicon Valley or Singapore to get funding. Problem 2. Corporate R&D is dead. Japanese corporations used to have legendary R&D labs. Sony, Panasonic, Toshiba. They invented the Walkman, the laptop battery, flash memory. But after 1991, companies cut R&D budgets because they were stuck keeping zombie operations alive and paying salaries to unproductive workers. Japanese corporate R&D spending as percent of revenue has fallen steadily for 30 years. Problem 3. The university system is ossified. Japanese universities are not Stanford or MIT. They're bureaucratic institutions where professors have lifetime tenure, publish in Japanese, so no one reads them, and produce graduates who are good at memorizing but terrible at creative problem-solving. Japan's best students go to University of Tokyo, graduate, and then join a bank or Toyota. They don't start companies. They don't disrupt industries. They become salarymen. Problem 4. Language barrier. Silicon Valley is global. Engineers from India, Israel, China, Europe all come to work together in English. Japan is isolated. Very few Japanese engineers speak English fluently. Very few foreign engineers want to move to Japan, expensive, culturally closed, language barrier. So Japan is cut off from the global talent pool. The result? Japan is great at making cars and cameras slightly better each year. But they completely missed. The smartphone revolution, Apple, Samsung won. The internet platform revolution, Google, Amazon won. The social media revolution, Facebook, Twitter won. The AI revolution, OpenAI, Google, Chinese companies leading. Japan is stuck fighting yesterday's wars with yesterday's weapons. The most painful example. Sony had the technology to build the iPod first. They had the Walkman. They had music rights. They had miniaturization expertise. But internal divisions, risk aversion, and inability to think disruptively meant they never built it. Apple did. And Apple destroyed Sony's music business. Japan went from leading the world in consumer electronics to being a footnote. Where is Japan's Google? It doesn't exist. It can't exist. Because the culture that creates Google's, risk-taking, failure-tolerant, youth-driven, globally connected, is the opposite of everything Japan has become since 1991. The yen trap isn't just about currency. It's about a society that's trapped in the past, unable to imagine a different future. Now we arrive at the final boss. The number that should terrify every economist on Earth but somehow doesn't because Japan has broken all the rules for so long that everyone's confused. 1,400 trillion yen. That's 9 trillion US dollars. That is Japan's national debt. It is 264% of GDP, the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any developed country in human history. Let me put that in perspective. Japan's debt is higher than what the US, UK, Germany, France, and Italy owe combined, relative to their economies. If any other country had this much debt, it would have collapsed. Bond markets would panic. Currency would crash. IMF would be called in. But Japan is different. Japan is special. Japan has discovered a cheat code that lets them borrow infinite money with no consequences. Or have they? How did Japan get here? Remember, Japan's economy hasn't grown since 1991. But the government kept spending. Every year, more pensions, more healthcare, more infrastructure projects to stimulate the economy. Where did the money come from? Borrowing. Issuing Japanese government bonds, JGBs. Every year for 30 years, Japan ran deficits of 5 to 10% of GDP. That adds up. Why hasn't Japan collapsed? Because of one magic trick. Japan owes the money to itself. 90% of Japanese government bonds are held by Japanese institutions and citizens. Japan Post Bank, postal savings, government pension funds, life insurance companies, the Bank of Japan, which owns 50% of all JGBs. Japan doesn't owe money to China or the US. It owes money to Japanese grandmas who have postal savings accounts. This means Japan can't default in the traditional sense. If the government can't pay, it just prints yen to pay itself. Because the BOJ and the government are effectively the same entity. This sounds perfect. What's the catch? The catch is that this only works as long as Japanese citizens keep buying JGBs. Right now, Japanese households hold 1,100 trillion yen in cash and savings. They're buying government bonds because they're risk-averse. See, bubble trauma. There are no better options. Stocks are scary, real estate is dead. Tradition, everyone does it. But what happens when Japanese households start selling? The demographic time bomb. Japan's elderly are starting to draw down savings. They're retiring. They need money to live. They're selling bonds. Meanwhile, young Japanese don't have money to buy bonds because wages are stagnant. Eventually, the Japanese household sector will flip from net buyer to net seller. When that happens, who buys the bonds? The Bank of Japan. Which means printing money. Which means inflation. Which means the yen crashes. The currency nightmare. Japan imports 90% of its energy. If the yen crashes, energy costs explode. Inflation surges. Living standards collapse. This is the yen trap, final stage. Japan can't default, but it also can't keep borrowing forever. Eventually, demographics force the system to break. The safe collapse. Japan is in a unique situation. Their collapse won't be sudden. It will be a slow, managed decline, a soft landing into irrelevance. The yen will weaken from 150 yen per dollar to 200 yen, then 250 yen. Inflation will run 3 to 5% for years. Pensions and savings will be quietly destroyed through inflation, not default. Young Japanese will flee. The population will fall from 123 million to 80 million by 2070. Japan will become what Italy is becoming: a beautiful museum civilization. Great food, amazing culture, cutting-edge toilets, but economically irrelevant. The debt monster won't kill Japan with a heart attack. It will suffocate it over 50 years. So, is this it? Is Japan destined to be the world's most sophisticated retirement home? I know this video has been heavy. We've looked at the bubble that destroyed a generation's wealth, the demographic collapse that's unstoppable, the zombie companies eating the economy alive, the deflation trap that makes growth impossible, the corporate loyalty cult that strangles innovation, the innovation desert where disruption goes to die, the debt monster that will eventually eat everything. It looks hopeless. But Japan has surprised the world before. This is a country that rose from the ashes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to become the second largest economy in barely 25 years. This is a country with immense reserves of private wealth. Japanese households have $18 trillion in savings. Japan leads the world in robotics and automation, material science, precision manufacturing, quality of life metrics, infrastructure, safety and social cohesion. The Made in Japan brand is still synonymous with quality. But to escape the yen trap, Japan needs a revolution. Accept failure as part of growth. Let zombie companies die. Let young entrepreneurs fail and try again. Open the labor market. End lifetime employment. Create mobility. Let people change jobs without stigma. Import young workers. Japan needs immigration. Desperately. They're starting. 1% of population is now foreign-born. But it's too slow. Unleash women. Japan has highly educated women pushed out of the workforce by childcare burdens. Fix that. Rebuild risk-taking culture. Entrepreneurs need funding, celebration, not shame for failure. Let the yen weaken. Stop propping it up. A weaker yen makes exports competitive again and reduces real debt burden. Accept inflation. 2 to 3% inflation for 10 years would solve the debt problem and restart growth. Stop fearing it. But here's the tragedy. Every single one of these reforms is politically impossible. The elderly control politics. They vote against immigration, threatens their culture. They vote against inflation, destroys their savings. They vote against letting zombie companies die, their sons work there. The young are too few, too exhausted, and too cynical to organize political change. Many just leave. So Japan is locked. Like a car with the engine on, the gas pedal pressed, but stuck in neutral. The engine roars, BOJ printing money, but the car doesn't move forward. The choice is Japan's. But unlike Italy, Japan isn't even having the conversation. Italy at least debates reforms. Japan has accepted stagnation as the natural order. They've normalized the lost decades. They've built an entire society around not growing. The alternative is too frightening to contemplate, that the party really is over. That 1989 was the peak. That everything since has been a slow, dignified funeral procession for the Japanese economic miracle. Japan isn't escaping the yen trap. Not because it can't, but because to escape would require becoming a completely different country. And Japan has decided it would rather be Japan, polite, stable, orderly, slowly fading, than transform into something unrecognizable just to chase GDP growth. Maybe that's not a trap. Maybe that's a choice. But for 123 million people watching their savings erode, their children emigrate, and their country become irrelevant on the world stage, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a cage. What do you think? Can Japan escape the lost decades? Or is the yen trap permanent? If you're Japanese or if you've lived in Japan, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me about the innovation you see happening. Or tell me I'm right and share your story of why you left. And if you learned something from this autopsy of the world's third largest economy, hit that like button. It helps the algorithm, which, unlike Japan's economy, is actually growing. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.